Hello and welcome. Today I am delighted to be joined by Jon Fearn. So Jon's a sports physiotherapist who I'm sure a lot of you will recognise. So Jon, thank you for joining.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks ever so much for asking me, Andy. I feel like an esteemed company with your life stories now as part of the gang. So no, that's a real privilege. So thanks.
No problem. No. Well, I'm delighted you can join. And I know that, I mean, you've been on my list for a while, but you've obviously been in an intense environment for a long time. So how are things going for you in general?
Yeah, very interesting. I officially left the club a few weeks ago, and was at Chelsea for 13 years. And it's a massive change, as you can imagine. Working in that environment was all encompassing, really. And I think it's one of those experiences where, and football is a bit like this, or professional sports are like this. People always talk about family comes first, and work comes second, and all sort of thing. But I hate to be realistic, but family doesn't come first. Work comes first, really, unfortunately, and family sometimes has to take second place around that, and that was always a challenge. And now I'm in the opposite world where I'm at home a lot, and it is tough, actually. I've never been out of work before. I've never been in this sort of situation where I can really do anything I want, really. I can go into different opportunities, and it is part of you. It's really excited by that and very excited about different opportunities that could be ahead of you. But it's the uncertainty, I think, that I find quite difficult at times. And talking to people that I have, either good friends or colleagues that I know in sport that have been through a similar process, I think firstly, the more they go through it, the better they get at dealing with it after every period of change. And they always feel that they're better for it and they're stronger for it. But it's, as they live in it day to day at the moment, is difficult. It is hard. And if someone said to me that on the 1st of June you're going to have a job, it's going to be really exciting and a great opportunity, a project to develop, and money's good, or whatever, it's I'd live life a little bit differently now. I'd probably enjoy myself a bit more, and relax a bit more. But every day you want to put time aside to sort of develop yourself or develop something to move forward with. So it is, as I say, and it's difficult, but again, as I say, part of you is excited by the prospect, and is trying to decide what you want to do is the hard thing, really. So
what was it like? We'll go back to your earlier days a bit later on, but what was it like when you first joined the club?
It was interesting, actually, because I was at Reading at the time, and I always had quite good links with Chelsea. Probably there was two members of staff there at the time. That was Glenn Driscoll, who was my academy physio. He's now at Leicester as the performance director at Leicester. Glenn was my academy physio, and he went to Chelsea a few years before, and he was a good friend of mine, and it's still a very close friend of mine. And so I always had good links with them, and I'd sort of knew Mike Banks, who was the physio at the time, over the years, and then Brian English, who became their medical director in the late 2000s. And there was an opportunity that came up, and I know you spoke to Dave recently. I think Dave and I were both looking at the job at roughly at the same time, but Reading had just got to the Premier League, and I'd felt that I think my second son had just got born as well, and I got to a point where I put so much effort into Reading, it wasn't quite the right time, and I wanted to experience the Premier League with a club and a group that we'd seen develop over a long period. So I think Dave took the role at that point, and then the opportunity then came up a few years later, and it got to a point where it was too good an opportunity to turn down. And I remember talking to some people last week about my experience of when I went to Chelsea and what I've learned from it. And I think I was a real cocky sod when I went to Chelsea. I think I felt that I had to prove myself and prove to the world. And I think this is a real trait in young, ambitious physios and members of in the football fraternity and sporting fraternity, really. And I think, I wound people up a little bit. I think I came across a little bit too egotistical, and I should have just taken a step back and thought, wow, this is an amazing experience. And that's just my reflection now, looking back on that. But the people I work with there, and the other senior physios that I work closely with, over time we built a really good bond. And it was very difficult at times, but then again there was periods like there is now that I see those guys that I work with as really quite good friends, and I think we'll continue to be friends going forward. And in football, there's not always that. There's no friends in football, and there is some truth in that. I think there is. It is a difficult environment, and when you step away from, say, even being at Chelsea for 13 years, it's interesting the people that keep in contact with you for the first week after you leave, and then interesting the people that are still in contact with you, say, a month or 6 weeks later. And then now, a few months later, what people are in contact, and you suddenly realize when you're going through a tough time or a difficult time, who your friends are. And I think whether they were friends or whether they were just acquaintances is always an interesting thing to reflect on. But I joined Chelsea at a fantastic time. It was 2010. I joined halfway through a season. Carlo Ancelotti was the manager, and we got to a point where the end of that season, we won the league. We won the FA Cup, I think, and we were going to Wembley all the time. And I remember in my first season, I was going, "Oh God, we're at Wembley again!" It's like we're at Wembley more often than we're at Stamford Bridge. And it was a real surreal experience. It was incredibly strange, going from, not that long ago, at Colchester away, where the showers are dripping on your head and your socks are soaking wet, and or you're lugging kit up the stairs at Rotherham with the kit man because there's no lift, or there's no, going from that extreme in League One to the highest games in the Premiership and the FA Cup was a surreal experience, but an amazing experience. And I was very lucky then for that following period at Chelsea to be working with some fantastic people in the medical department, sports science department, developed a lot over the years. And then, the great late Nick Broad, who was the sports scientist at Chelsea, set a mantra of a great sports science department that's gone on to develop with people like Joe Clubb and who have gone on to bigger and better things. And there was a lot of people working there that have evolved into great people and great people that have really delivered some wonderful work in developing the world of professional football from a support network in many, many ways. So I've been very fortunate, really, and say in the latter years to develop a really good relationship with Thierry Laurent, who, I think he'd agree that we didn't always see eye to eye. We had quite a different philosophy on how we looked at things, but together over the last few years, we worked really well together, and we bounced ideas off each other really well. And I think it was a really good example of how two physios, particularly from very different backgrounds and different approaches and philosophies, and maybe Paco was our conductor in that sense, could really evolve how things were really successful at the club. And I think, one of my take homes from my time at Chelsea is how we measure our performance in the medical team. And for me, the medical team is really based on availability of players and minimising players getting re-injured, because I think if players are getting re-injured, you're not doing your job well enough. And also if you've got, like the difficulties they've got at the moment, if your availability of players is really low, again, that's a reflection on the whole performance team, whether it be medical, fitness, sports science, everyone, coaching. And so those measures were incredibly good during the period we were there. One of my jobs at Chelsea which were many, was overseeing a lot of the data analysis and a lot of the analysis of how the Champions League audit worked within the club and throughout Europe, and how we sat amongst a lot of the analytics we used to measure our own performance. And I'd say we were top 6 out of sort of 22, 24 Champions League teams every year. Sometimes we're first, second in terms of availability, and I think sometimes our approaches were seen as a little bit untraditional and a little bit maverick at times. But I must admit, some of our results were incredible, and I think it's really appreciating the difference between performance medicine and football medicine, and what it's like to work in a private practice, which I'm doing a little bit at the moment. It's a completely different world. My God, treating a player from sort of 9:30 till 4:30, compared to seeing someone that I saw, triathlete last week for an hour, and thinking, my God, I've got all this time, and thinking, oh my God, it's so pressured. And then seeing 12 of them in a day, it's massive hats off to anyone who works in private practice. And our good friend Luke Anthony has got his clinic in Go Perform with Dan and Tristan and the gang. It is full on, and I respect them big time after experiencing a little bit. I did private practice back in the early days, but I haven't been in it for a good few years, and going back to it it's a fantastic test to yourself, I must admit. But yeah, it was a great period, and joining the club at that time when they were really riding high was wonderful, really.
And then why do you think that so Dave Hancock took that role before you, as you were saying there? Why did they come back for you again, do you think? What was it about you?
I don't know, really. I must admit, I think my relationship with Brian was very good, the medical director at the time, and I think when I came in, I think because Brian had made probably the decision, and even though I think Jason Palmer and Thierry were also involved in the decision, I think I must admit, looking back at it now, I think it was Brian that made the ultimate decision. And I think Glenn was always very positive about my work from his experience with me at Reading. So I think it was that initially, and knowing what I was like, and I saw it as a great opportunity just to take my experience and my level of knowledge to probably the ultimate level in football, really, experiencing really the highest level of the game. And it was just seeing really where not an unlimited budget, but a significant budget, and with the restrictions of what Reading and West Ham always had, but having that environment where really, if you really wanted something, you probably could get it, and yet you still had to justify it accordingly. And I know some of the early conversations you and I had about equipment and different things, and you probably agree that Chelsea were a hard nut to crack. They were a hard bunch to convince, and I think sometimes that was a good thing, because I think it really questioned others to really sell what they're trying to deliver, and really, why is this going to change? Because I think our approach at the club was quite logical and quite straightforward. It wasn't set in tablets of stone. We didn't do BFR or weird and wonderful machines and things like that. It was all quite logical and straightforward, and it was a philosophy that I learned a lot over the years, because I came from probably a very athletic driven model of rehab at Reading and before. And I think over the years of Chelsea, I just realised the importance of football and function, and the stress on tissue is so important, and you've got to stimulate that tissue accordingly. And I've got to give a lot of credit to people like Thierry for teaching me that.
And at what point then did you realise that you were cocky? Like, it was that week one, or how long did that take to think, actually there's a lot I can learn, in whatever capacity? I
think the first time I really realised was really because of the advice I was given when I was coming to put my contract together at Chelsea, and little things like your salary and the package. I was getting advice from somebody who was from a business environment, and I think the advice I was given was just incorrect, and was just not very humble. It was very cutthroat, and I think I came across initially as a bit cocky then, because I was perceived to be, well, he's asking for this and he's asking for that, when he's coming from Reading Football Club. How can he command this? And I think I was just really misguided by others because it was, again, going to a club like that was a big step for me. So I was asking for advice on how to go around negotiating the best process and package for that. And so it took me a while to break that down. And when you come into a new club and you're in a new environment, again, the benefit of youth, you want to prove yourself. You want to show that you can do everything, and you know this and you know that. And again, I think it's just the benefit of age and experience and maturity that, my God, I think I feel like I know less now than when I qualified. And the more you read, the more you realize you don't know. You look at a good example is, say, that the issue with, say, hamstring injuries at the moment, and how hamstring injuries are going through the roof. There was a paper that came out last week about it's gone up to 24% with injury rates now in the Premier League and the UEFA, and then you've got 3 C's and 4 C's, and everybody needs surgery, and what's the best rehab for this and that. And we didn't know any of that 10-15 years ago, and yet I don't remember the injury rates being either so bad or the re-injury rates being so bad. And I think we can overthink things a little bit, and we can overanalyze it. But yeah, I think I've lost my train of thought, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to ask you as well that you've got a lot of different things going on there, and you get a lot of managers. So you go in, and Ancelotti's the manager, and how does that from the outside, Chelsea are perceived as being a ruthless club, get rid of managers. How does that translate to the medical team?
Well, again, I think because of our philosophy at the club and because of our consistency, again, the wonderful thing I loved about the club was the medical department wasn't siloed. So a lot of clubs have, the medical team in the men's first team they're concentrating on the men, and the women's team are concentrating on the women, and the academy are sort of left to their own devices, and they might have the odd in-service training once a month where they all get together for a cup of tea and talk about bunions or something, and they just have a bit of lip service to sort of a department. Whereas, again, Paco was the main instigator for this. As the medical director, it was a real department, and a department that oversaw the whole club. And particularly in the last 5-6 years, that was my role, was really coordinating that aspect of, I'd say 70% of my work was working for the first team, with rehab, covering games as of when necessary, but I only used to do about 6 a year. My days are run on pitches. I think I've done more than enough, and there's much more juicy things to do back at the training ground, I think. And then part of my role was line manager to the academy physios, and managing those and assisting the medical staff in the management of their injuries. And I'd have meetings there every day. And then also being a bit of an assistance to the women's team. So it was an overseeing role, which was nice. And it was facilitating that departmental issue. And we always had a mantra in the club where any injury was always assessed with a doctor and a physio present, because we felt that the professions looked at things very differently, and we're more powerful together. And also, when we had problem patients in different sectors, we'd all get together, whoever's available, to then review that player. So, for instance, if an under 15 boy had a particular ongoing knee issue that the academy wanted a little bit more of an assistance or some advice on, they'd come over to the first team building, usually because that's where most of the other facilities like the fluoroscope or the ultrasound or the other piece of kit was available. And we had a good sized medical room. And as a group, we would then assess the player as a group. And sometimes in this room, there could be three doctors, probably 4, 5, 6 physios. And cumulatively, you've got 150 years plus of experience all seeing that player. And that was quite powerful, actually. And it was organised in a nice way that the lead physio or the player would assess them, would then discuss any issues. Everybody had an opportunity to ask questions. Player would then leave the room, and then we'd have a discussion with everybody having a voice and an opinion. And then there'd be a team decision about how that player would be taken forward. And that could only really be done because of that overseeing philosophy of the whole club. And I'm not really, again, maybe I'm just been stuck behind Cobham training ground for so long that I'm not aware that other clubs do it, but I haven't heard many clubs do that process very much. And I thought that was quite a powerful process. And I really enjoyed, for my job, the beauty of it was the variety of seeing, having experience of under 9s, under 10s boys players, girls with ACLs at 16, just as much as the players that are playing on the pitch at Stamford Bridge every week. And that was really quite exciting and quite interesting.
And was that something that you thought straight away would be a good thing, or when Paco talked about it, was it something that you maybe questioned at the time?
I think it was something that evolved over time, really. I think previously, again, with all the managers that come, I think coming back to your point, really, I've just remembered what we were talking about when I started. With all the managers, the thing that was needed to be consistent was the medical philosophy. And I think whenever a new manager came in, it was proven to that manager that this is our philosophy. These are our results, as in the results that we had from this philosophy with match availability or that sort of thing. And we covered that availability was covered throughout the whole club. So we'd know availability on a monthly basis for the under 9 boys, the under 10 boys, the under 11 boys, all the way up to the 23s. And we'd have it for the girls from under 10s, under 12s, under 16s, the women's first team and the men's first team. So we had data on match availability for everyone. And obviously when you got teams like the under 15s, where, with growth plate issues and Osgoods and Severs and things, there was times when that availability was challenging. But we set ourselves a high standard. The average Champions League team runs availability about 86% for a season, and we set our target for every squad to be 90%. 90% and above was what we aimed for, and I'd say most of the time it was always over 90%. There was obviously the odd season where it was challenging, and particularly when COVID hit, things were a bit difficult. But that was an overseeing thing that developed together. And by proving to the management that this is our philosophy, and Paco always felt that when a new manager came in, it was the medical team's role to develop their knowledge and adapt their knowledge on how this is how we work, and this is how the medical department works, and these are the results that we get, and prove to them that just trust us. We have an injury, we'll obviously discuss everything as a team with everyone, all the stakeholders, but believe in us. And I think that's what kept us as a consistent medical team for such a long time. And this, I always joked that after probably even this time last year in our department at the club, I was probably the second newest member of staff, and I'd been there this time last year 12 years. So it just shows you the consistency of the staff. And I know, with the new owners, change is good, and change is good. But I think also, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think getting rid of some staff, and this is not just a personal dig for me, but you can lose a lot of good when you're trying to make so much change. And I think that's the challenge they're having at the moment. But again, it's interesting when managers change a lot. We did have, I think I've had 16 managers in something like in my career, which is ridiculous, really. But they've all got their different quirks, their philosophies, and you have to adapt around that. So even though our philosophy as a department was consistent, you'd always have to adapt to the subtleties. Like Conte wanted players that were always really fit, as in they needed to be running a lot and doing a lot of physical activity and fitness related work and certain metrics before they were allowed into training. Whereas Jose was very different. Jose was very, very adaptable. Basically, if they could put their boots on and they could walk, he wants them in training. He wants them involved. He wants to get them involved. So the diversity of how the managers wanted to work and how we got them involved into training, and that transition was very different depending on the manager, and we had to adapt around that process.
And was there ever anything where you thought it didn't agree with that Was there ever any sort of heated discussions around that where you thought that it's gone too far, or could you always see the bigger picture?
I think I learned really how there's more than I think one of the talks I listened to, that one of your life stories before, and I think it was Wayne talking about, Wayne Diesel, about more than one way to skin a cat, and it's so true. I think I learned the variety of what is necessary to get a player fit. You know, I remember someone like Eden Hazard. Eden was a fantastic guy, really so laid back. He was practically, you know, lying down most of the time, but, you know, wasn't a particularly good trainer. But when he, oh my God, when he was playing, he was incredible. And him and another young player, Ethan, they both fractured their ankle roughly about the same time. And one player took a very traditional approach in their rehab, whereas Eden just said, John, it was during the summer, and he says, I don't want to do any gym. I can't stand the gym. I never go in the gym. I don't think I can spell gym. You know, I just, you know, I don't. It's not my thing. And we just had to come up with a way of actually getting that ankle moving and getting it tolerating load and strength in a different type of way. And we did a lot of pool work. We're very lucky to have a good pool facility at the club. And then we played a hell of a lot of table tennis. We played a hell of a lot of badminton. And then we did a lot of work on the field. And it taught me that variety and that bespokeness to rehab is so important. Engaging the athlete, engaging the player is so important. Whereas, say, the other fractured ankle was more traditional, you know, some strength work in the gym, a bit of auto G or pull, or then getting out in the field, but still doing some gym work. And I think it taught me that you got to adapt your approach in so many different ways, depending on what's in front of you, really. But yeah, I think the difference of the approaches when you've got a team of clinicians that come from different countries. At one point, we had people, clinicians from, you know, Brazil, England, Spain, France, and those philosophies, their cultures and their beliefs are all very different. But then again, your players all come from different countries and they've got different beliefs and cultures. So you can't impose what you think and you believe is the only way to manage somebody if they don't believe in that process. And so having that multicultural, multi-belief department was very powerful at delivering what we felt was necessary to a very multicultural belief strategy within the team. And it was, at times, it was a match that worked really well.
Yeah, because it is interesting, and that pulling all of those from a language barrier perspective. Was that an intentional thing to get people from different countries, cultures, backgrounds?
I think it sort of just evolved, really. I think it evolved through, you know, the Spanish therapists, and I go back to when Fernando Torres was there, and he brought a therapist with him, Ivan, who's now at Real Madrid, and he showed us really a way of manual therapy that I'd never really seen before, probably on the very, very subtle soft tissue fascial release sort of mechanotransduction type philosophy. And that was evolved with clinicians following that. So once we saw the need for that type of skill, then when Ivan left and Jose came in as to deliver that skill, the different cultures, or the different ways the therapists were trained, were able to deliver a certain type of skill that we felt could match the whole plethora of skills that the department was offering. And so we had different staff that were able to offer different things. And if we felt that there was a need and a gap for a type of skill, we then realised we needed to fill it. But I think because the team was so consistent for many years, we had most of the bases covered. And then when things came along, I don't know, something like BFR came along, I'd then, you know, whoever would go off and say, right, this is the new thing. This looks really interesting. Let's look into that. And then we'd make a decision as a team whether it was something we want to bring into the department or not. And then it was difficult at times because there was decisions made that we didn't always agree with. There was decisions about a new concept that we thought was really great and we wanted to do, but certain members of the staff or of the department didn't feel it was appropriate and wasn't necessary. So that's always the frustration when you work in a team, because you don't always get your own way, and you don't always, it's not always your way or the highway. You have to swallow it and go, okay, fair enough. You don't agree with it, fair enough. We will go another way. And that again, learning to accept a team decision is important. I think in football, it's people are always thinking about number one all the time, whether the players do, because the players definitely do a lot of the time, but also from the staff point of view, and a lot of stabbing in the back. And yes, they might go along with the team decision in that team meeting, but behind the scenes they're going, well, I don't really agree with this. I think we're not really doing enough gym work, or I don't think you should be outside by now. This shouldn't be a problem. And that can be a real toxic little growth that can cause problems over time. So I think you have to make sure that your team is really engaged in a team decision, and people, again, it's a lot of it down to ego. I think people with egos don't like to be told what to do, and don't like to be accept that it's part of the department. But somewhere on that chain, someone's got to take responsibility. And I think in our environment, yes, we all took our responsibility for the duties and the responsibilities we had. We always had a lead physio with whoever was managing a particular more longer term injury. But the medical director was the boss. He had the ultimate say if there was a decision to be made. And in a way, that's why the heads of department get paid the big bucks, really, and because they take that responsibility and they take it on their shoulders. Which then spreading the responsibility through the team should reduce your sleepless nights and your anxieties, because you're sharing the responsibility of your decisions with everyone else. So it goes both ways. I think it's important that you don't take too much on board and think your way is the only way, because by doing that, you're then the mightier may fall more. Whereas if you're sharing the responsibility, you've got a shared approach. That if things do go wrong, now we had a big problem with Ongolo with his hamstring, and I remember, and this was soon before I left, and Ongolo it's always a very difficult injury management process to deliver, and I felt the responsibility was being pushed on me quite a lot, and I said, and I got everybody together, everybody in a room, and said, right, we need to, as a team, make the right decision here. What is the right thing? When is he going to reintroduce training? What do we want to achieve in order to let this player get back? And by sharing that responsibility, then when unfortunately things didn't go well, it wasn't just my decision that was made. It was a shared approach. Everybody had an opportunity to express what they thought. So whether it was a nail in my coffin, I don't know. but again, that's the benefit of hindsight. I did the right thing at the right time, trying to do the right thing that I thought was the best way to manage the process, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the same in all walks, really. You're trying to do the best you can with the information that you've got at that time. And then in terms of, I've heard with some of the people that I've spoken with previously, both on camera and off, is that Mourinho can be challenging. When he first goes in, he likes to stamp his authority on things. And I don't know whether that was something that you got involved with when he first came in. I know he'd been at the club previously. But was he any different to any of the other people that you worked with?
No, because I think I don't see as Jose particularly difficult than other managers. I think I can name a few managers that were difficult, and also managers that were so welcoming and embracing department. I think one of the most positive things I remember with when Thomas Tuchel was with us is how embracing he was to the people that were at the club. Sometimes you think whether it was too much, whether he was too trusting and too engaging in what processes and people's advice, rather than saying, take a bit of control, you're the manager. He was wonderful, and a bit like Steve Coppell when I was at Reading. His mantra was just really simple. He's probably one of the best football people from a management perspective. I think, having been a very, very experienced player to the highest level, you could really tell that. Whereas a lot of the managers at Chelsea, Probably Frank aside, probably didn't play at the highest level as much, and their traits and their development came in a slightly different process in a different way. But there are managers that are challenging, but again, you just have to deal with it. You have to manage it as best you can, and you just try and do on a day-to-day basis, deliver what you're there to do. And I think the important thing is you're there to do a job, and it's doing the job that you're there for. So many people start to get involved in other people's job, or to get involved with other people's situations, and start to get a bit busy, and you think, oh, just stick to your job, just do what you need to do, and what you're paid for. Don't get involved in anything else, because that's not what you're there to do, really.
Yeah, and that is, I think that's with football, everyone wants those jobs, don't they? It's like, it's the Premier League, football's the biggest industry by a mile. Premier League's the biggest club, and then you're at Chelsea, one of the biggest clubs in the world. And do you think does that create an environment of people that do come in cocky, or do you think that that's a good environment to get the people that do aspire to be the best? Like you had it's amazing to hear what consistency you had with that member of the members of the team. Do you think that was because that you'd built such a strong team, or do you think that really that it would have been helpful to have maybe sort of kept it fresher from bringing in people throughout like the 13 years you were there?
I think that because of the people that were there, and this is probably one of my traits, is that I can't sit still. I have to keep learning. I have to keep pushing myself to find out what's going on. You know, again, one of my roles was going probably to most of the conferences to learn and bring back information to the department to see what was going on. So I'd always go to Kinetic. I'd always go to sort of an ESCA conference, or a conference all over the place. And we were lucky enough to be invited to speak a couple of times. But the idea really for me was, when I went to Kinetics, I then sat in as many lectures as I could and just kept some notes and fed that back. And so having people in the department that are keen to develop and keep up to date with what's going on around you. And it's probably the excuse that, it's one of those phrases of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Yes, if it's not broke, don't fix it, but you can still make it better. It's like Formula One. I'm a big Formula One fan, and I love the idea of, Red Bull, or Mercedes, they're just improving that thing every single time. And Mercedes messed it up big time last year by messing up the car and basically bouncing along the track. And but you're always looking to improve, however good you are. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to bring people in to do that. You can always adjust and make sure that people that are within your team to develop even further. I look at the success someone like Fulham have at the moment. Fulham are doing incredibly well, but the staffing they've had in that club has been consistent for many years. And I think the staff around there have developed. They've still encouraged themselves to be better throughout that process. No one really sits on their laurels, because if you do, you do get left behind. And I don't think you do achieve what you're aiming to achieve. So I think it wasn't that. Yeah, probably the other thing is that we all enjoyed our jobs. We loved our jobs so much. People never left. So if people aren't leaving, there's no one in to come in. So and because it's such a male-dominating environment, no one's having babies and going on maternity leave. So and even the female staff that had kids and then came back into the Chelsea medical department, they wanted to come back. They felt that they had things to offer, and we made them as comfortable and as flexibility as possible to let that work, because they were useful members of staff to us. But it was but if people aren't leaving, you can't fill the post. And we were always very well, very catered for. I think back in the day we had a very large department. Now I think the department's probably or when I was there, it was probably about average in terms of number of physios to number of doctors and that sort of thing. But I don't know what the situation is there at the moment. But it was perceived to be once upon a time a very, very highly populated for medical staff, whereas now I think there's clubs that have overtaken that role, really. But
and then when you've got such a tight-knit community, when there was that really high-profile incident with you and another member of the team, like how did that manifest, and how big an impact did that have?
So I think you're referring to the Swansea game. So it was really, the incident was really nothing in some respects. We were one, I think, was it the first game of the season? We were playing Swansea at home. Nice sunny day. Myself and Eva were the match on-field staff for that game. Jose was the manager, and we were drawing, and it was a corner, and Eden had gone down injured, and he wasn't getting up, and so Eva and I just decided, well, we're not going to go on. You know, it's Eden. Knowing your players is always important. We just give them some time to get up. And there must have been about 2 or 3 occasions where the referee was calling us on, and it got to a point where it was clear that we had to go on. We couldn't just sit there. We refused to go on. And as soon as we'd made the decision to go on the pitch, it was clear the manager wasn't happy with that decision, because obviously a corner, the player has to come off the pitch, and we would have been down to 1 less man. And from what I remember, I think someone had got sent off. So we were down to 9 just for that corner. And then immediately after that, as we came off the pitch, Jose was screaming and shouting at us for going on the pitch and for that situation. And it really just ballooned from there, really, the whole situation. I don't know whether there was a little bit of clever tactics on Jose's behalf, because we drew against Swansea when we should have been beating them, and it took a massive deflection away from the result. But it was clear that after that, and the publicity the incident got, and then how we both, Eva and I, dealt with the situation was different. I made it clear that at the end of the game, or particularly I had a chat with Jose the following day, and just said to him, just say, I'm not here to create a problem. I'm here to do my job. You know, I wasn't going on the pitch for me. I was going on there because I felt I was there to do my job. I'm here to help. I'm not here to create any problems. And we were cool. You know, literally the following day, no problems at all. And I think we had Man City the following game, and Jose wanted me to travel because I'd been traveling for all the time, and he said he wanted me to travel, so I travelled to the game. I didn't do the run on because the club felt it wasn't probably good, that because of the situation, and because Eva's situation had gone off on a slightly different tangent, and she wasn't involved with the games then from then on. That I was at Man City, and I was going to even sit and watch the game in the sort of in the lounge, and Jose dragged me out with Paco and said, no, come and sit outside on the bench and watch the game. I think in the end I did stay in the lounge for that game, but it was clear that our relationship was fine, really. I think somebody, one of your guests before, talked about an incident where, by challenging, I think it was Dave, actually. I think Dave Hancock mentioned the point of when he got challenged by Jose about him telling me he was rubbish, or he wasn't as good as Dean Keneally, and but that gave him that authority afterwards and that respect in return, and I think that was probably a little bit what happened to myself and Jose, and we had a very good working relationship after that, really. But it was interesting, really, how that whole process, all the press and how the discussion, and I in the end just got on with my job. I just carried on from the game onwards, from that incident onwards, just carried on doing my job and didn't really think anything of it, really. Whereas Eva's situation went in a different path, and she ended up it all ended up going to court, and she ended up settling with the club. So and then went on to have a successful career in sports medicine. So Yeah, it's an interesting experience, but I look back on it and think I learned a lot from it, really. And you are just merely just there to do your job, and you got to do it at your best ability and believe in that. But there's always all the other stuff that is around you. And the exposure at a club like Chelsea is massive. You can imagine if it happened at, I don't know, Scunthorpe against Mansfield, it probably wouldn't have got the exposure as it did.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but it is
No,
what it
absolutely.
is. And that's the beauty of Chelsea Football Club, I think, or the teams at that level.
Definitely. And then, so that's been really interesting going through your Chelsea time. But like in terms of starting out, what made you want to get into physio in the first place?
It was funny when I was doing my A levels. I felt that there was a real gap in what I wanted to do. I think when I was quite young, I wanted to be a vet. And then I realised I didn't like cats very much. They made me sneeze quite a bit. I used to live in East London, and I'd have pollution and cats and everything else didn't agree with me. So and then a friend of the family was a doctor, and so I was thinking about medicine. But the idea of training for 5 years and then really not having much clinical autonomy after that period, I thought, God, it's a long old process. I probably wasn't clever enough either with my A levels. I was a bit of a lazy sod at my A levels, and really I was also looking into doing what they at the time was like a sports science degree stroke sports management type thing. But back then there wasn't the sports scientists like we have now in football, or the analysts element or anything like that, or sport generally. So the only idea I could go off and do some sort of degree at Loughborough was you come out of it and become a leisure centre manager, or something really quite obscure. And I thought, I don't fancy that. And then I just sort of put two and two together, and the sport and the medicine side of things. And I looked into physio. I remember having a book. It was written by the shoe company Scholl, and I wonder if I've still got it. My mum's got it at home, and it just had all these injuries like infrapatellar pole pain. I remember one because I used to get it when I was a kid, and all these weird. It was a crap book, really, but I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by this way of having these injuries and finding something to do, and I think that facilitated me to go into medicine. I think there was also a trait of a very female dominated profession. I thought, well, that could be exciting as a 17, 18-year-old. And then I went to St Mary's in Paddington and trained as a physio, and made some friends there that are still my very close friends that I still know very well today. And then I did my NHS training, which I felt, well, I really look back on fondly, because I think your NHS, what was then like rotations, junior rotations back then, where you spent about 6-9 months in different areas, gave me a really good grounding. And I was into neuro a bit at the time. I quite found the neuro side of things from a handling point of view and looking at movement and things quite fascinating. I worked at the Wolfson Centre, which was part of St George's and Axon Morley Hospital back in the time when I was a junior, and in fact where I met my wife. But as soon as I qualified, because I had that sport bug in me a little bit, I got involved with London Welsh and Richmond Rugby Club, and I used to look after those at the weekends on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday I did some American football stuff. Back then, in those sort of the early 90s, there was like the World League, which was like the Barcelona Dragons, the Scottish Claymores, and the London Monarchs. Was a European league for the rookies from the NFL would come over and keep their gameplay up, and the Monarchs used to play at Crystal Palace and that sort of thing. So I got a little bit involved in that. But the British team, the GB team, and also the London-based team was an amateur team called London Olympians, and they were a really good team. They were sort of British champions a few times and European champions. Started to do a bit of travelling with the team as well as doing my NHS stuff, and that got quite good at strapping ankles. That's where I probably learned how to strap an ankle, and it just gave me a real exposure to that sporting world and sporting injury world while doing the NHS stuff. And then I came across, I just decided I needed to take my knowledge to another level. So in about 96, 97, I started to think about doing my master's degree. Saved loads of money, doing some load of private work, got a grant from the Arthritis and Rheumatism Council, and was lucky enough to funded my master's degree. And while I was doing that, I was a massive, well, I am now a massive West Ham fan when I was a kid. My grandfather was a massive influence on my football life, and he was a big season ticket holder in the Chicken Run at Upton Park. And I bumped into John Green, who was the physio at West Ham at the time, and we got on quite well. He was looking at setting up his private practice in Chapel Heath, and asked if I would like to get involved. And so I got involved with John setting up his private practice, and at the same time I was doing some academy work at West Ham. And my first team, I think, was the under-16s, and that's when there was like Michael Carrick in the team, and I think Joey Cole would come down and play the odd game from when he was up at Lilleshall with the England programme. So back then it feels like a hell of a long time ago, and I've got a picture in my gym area which got a picture of me. Peter Braybook was the manager. Pete, who's still the kit man at West Ham, was the kit man for the under-16s. I was there for a bit, and then when that season came to an end, John Green decided he wanted to go to Australia to do a MINIPS course. My master's had finished. I was doing some private practice at John's and at a Greenwich clinic, and it got to a point where he said, I need someone to help me out to cover while I go to Australia to do this course. Would you step in? So I worked with the first team for a bit, and then they offered me a full-time role, going on from there, really. So, and I must admit, my experience at West Ham was amazing. Obviously, being a fan was quite awe-inspiring, but also more importantly, it was, working with John, who's a great physio and a really, really nice guy, and moving on through the time when West Ham was pretty semi-glamorous in a way. And you had players like Daryl Suker won the Golden Boot, and then you had Razor Ruddock and Ian Wright and Stuart Pearce and Rio and Frank and Joe Cole and Freddie Canuti, who's had legs as long as was an incredible athlete. But it was a great period, a great time, and they got into Europe and won the Intertoto Cup and that side of things, and it was a really nice experience to get your first grounding in first team football before I moved on.
Yeah, that really was a great team, and the youth setup was amazing. There wasn't it with Defoe and then Di Canio, was he there when you were there?
Di Canio, yeah, Di Canio, my lasting impression with Paolo was he used to shave everything. He was really quite hairy, but he never had any hair on him. And he used to shave his body, but he used to do his gym work in just his shorts. So he used to just pose around doing a few little exercises. I've seen a few players like that. Don't really do much, but they sort of look good and like looking at themselves in the mirror. But he was a great guy, really great character. And he had his own personal, Analdo, I think his name was. He had his own personal trainer as well, which was probably the start of like the guru system that we now see pretty thick and fast in football now. But Paolo, yeah, great guy, really, really great guy. And he scored an amazing goal at Man United when we were up there, which will always go down well, I think, with the West Ham fans. But yeah, and obviously going from West Ham as a West Ham fan to Chelsea, obviously my grandfather didn't speak to me for quite a while, but it was, sorry, to Reading, and then going to Chelsea. But it was a great experience and a great time, and having characters like Harry Redknapp as your manager, and the late great Glenn Roeder as well towards the end was amazing.
So what made you want to leave there then?
It was probably two things really. One, firstly, it was an opportunity came along. I was doing a reserve game over at Kingstonian with West Ham and covering a West Ham game, and Martin Allen came over. And Martin Allen, obviously a great West Ham player in his day, and he was assistant manager at Reading, and with Alan Pardew was the manager, and they were looking at changing a few things in their medical system and their medical department. And he said, you free after the game? We can go for a beer and have a chat, really. So they were looking at employing a new physio at the club, and Reading were in League One at the time. they'd just had a few years before the new stadium, the Medici Stadium was just been completed, which was pretty cutting edge at the time, really, in terms of 25,000 seat stadium, all twinkly and nice and clean and tidy. And so that was that. It was an opportunity to go into a department and to lead a department and develop a department was probably one thing. There was also an incident that happened at West Ham that a player had gone off, was injured, and he'd gone off on a bit of a wild weekend in another part of the country and got himself in trouble, and basically put the blame on my door a hell of a lot for allowing him to go. And the manager didn't really see me in positive light ever since, even despite I told him I told you that he didn't turn up for treatment the following day and did the right thing. And I think the manager never just lost a bit of maybe faith in me a little bit after that incident, really, not through my own fault. And so I thought it was probably about time. I'd been there 4 years. Probably about time to move on and do something new, which was a shame, I think, how it worked. But in the end, it was a great thing. It was joining Reading at League One. We got promoted the first year to the Championship, and then over the subsequent few years, then got into the Premier League for the first time in their history, which was just incredible. Probably one of the most amazing days I've had in football, and I've been to 2 Champions League finals and things. So, you know, it was a great time. Leicester away, where we got promoted to the Premier League, was fantastic.
I remember when I got my job in this area, which is again 15 odd years, coming over to see you at the old training ground, which is lovely. I remember it because it's a nice area, isn't it, in that part of the world. Do you have like porter cabins? You had some.
Yeah. And they literally had them until relatively recently. Reading's new training ground has only just really been finished a few miles down the road, because I still live in the area. And we had porter cabins. Well, when we got promoted, we had one porter cabin that had 2 beds in it, and that's what we got promoted in. The same porter cabin got moved over to somewhere else. And they lived in porter cabins for about 10 plus years, I think. Until they got to a point of selling the club and then have built an infrastructure. Ironically, I went for a bike ride the other day and went past the old training ground, and now there's houses. And I'm thinking, where do these houses come? My God, they can knock up a house in about 5 minutes these days. I'm thinking, I came here a few months ago and there was porter cabins still there. But yeah, it was. But it just shows you also, you don't need fancy facilities. You know, you're talking about the times at Chelsea, or you look at Spurs' new training ground and Liverpool's and Man City's and all these wonderful, amazing environments. But, you know, if you've got good people with good mantra, good work ethics, and a good bunch of players all willing to work for each other and the right mantra, you can achieve anything. And I think that's what I learned going from Reading from League One. Because one funny thing is, when I went for the job there, they never took me to the training ground, which was funny, because it was a proverbial hole. It really was. It was at Sonning Hockey and Cricket Club. When I first went there, we didn't even have a porter cabin for a medical room. I had to talk to the chief executive about getting a sort of designated medical room. But it was this dive of a training ground with that we were renting from a hockey and cricket club, and we trained there. Changing rooms were all old, and that was your medical room, and I'd have to go to the local David Lloyd to do any relative rehab work, or go to the pool to do some pool work. And so you spent most of my time driving backwards and forwards. And then there was times when a few players, I remember 2 particular old players, one of them now is one of the coaches at Coventry, and whenever they got to the gym, they said, right, you buying then? So they wouldn't actually agree to do any work in the gym unless I bought them a cake and a coffee first. So they go in there, sit there and have their cake and a coffee, and I'd, come on, for God's sake, we've got to go and do something. So, you know, you have to bribe them to then get them in the gym. But obviously things have moved on a little bit since then. But that was a funny moment. But using the facilities that are around you, I think, we're even at people at lower clubs, you know, never feel that you're being limited and blaming the facility around you. You know, use what you can access. And I think that's what I love about places like Luke Anthony's place at Go Perform, and the guys up in Liverpool, with people that have worked in professional sport and professional football, have now developed these gyms and these environments to offer the facility and the services that they've experienced and delivered to professional athletes that you can now deliver at to anyone in the street. And I think it's a fantastic idea and a fantastic model of a business to deliver that sort of approach. Because why should it be exclusive, especially when you think that the basics of really what makes people really better are pretty consistent all the way through, and you don't need lots and lots of money to do it, really.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned about like where you come from and where you ended up at Chelsea. And I was having a chat with a lot of the people, whether it's Mark Leather or Gary Lewin or whatever, and they're saying there was so many good things. Remember Dave Galley saying when he went in at Fulham, it was like there was nothing. It was like so bad, but it was so enjoyable as well that you've got control of everything. Whereas then you move to, you've been at Newcastle recently where you got massive teams, and it's good in one way, but it loses something, and there's more confusion. There's a lot of there's pros and cons to both sides of the coin.
Absolutely. I look back at my time at Reading when there was probably just me and Glenn Driscoll was the academy physio and myself, and that was the medical team. We'd had a part-time GP doctor, and the we had a masseur, Ricky. Ricky makes me my memory of Ricky always makes me laugh, because for one reason he covered a reserve game, and one of the players fractured their clavicle, and he just went in and looked at this shoulder and went, "Fucking hell!" and just screamed at the back of his head. I'm thinking, Rick, you really need to work on your professionalism a little bit, because the player just panicked. But it was back then where we were really on a shoestring budget, and developing it to what it is now as a sort of Premiership level department. And then you've got the extremes where you've got a department that has got so many people, creates its own problems. Personalities, someone not getting on with anybody, a therapist thinking, well, I do a massage on bloody so-and-so every week at every 10 o'clock, and now so-and-so's doing it and he's not available, and the hassle it creates. And sometimes my best memories are the simple times just as much as the more complicated times, really. It's not always what it's cracked up to be, but then again, I think it's always easy for someone like Mark Leather, Dave Fever, Wayne, and all those that have experienced the high level. It's easier for us to say, it's not what it's cracked up to be, and it's all a bit of a surreal experience, and we've had great opportunities to get to what we've done. But it's easier said than done, because young people do want to aspire and to achieve those things, and why not, if that's what they want to do? So yeah.
No, absolutely. And then you must, I'm sure, like just looking at the trophies I can see on the back of that unit behind you, I mean, that is pretty impressive. Like, I'm interested to know a bit more about those, and then also just find out what some of the high points have been for you, because I'm presuming they're for the numerous trophies that were won at Chelsea.
Yeah. I think the little one on the side is my championship medal, which the championship medal is really probably the most special one to me when we got promoted to Reading, because it's only the only staff that get one is the trainer, the physio, and the manager. So I'm very lucky to get the same medal as the players would do at a championship. I don't know whether things have changed since 2004-05 when I got that. So that is probably, and it's a beautiful medal. I can show you it if you want, but it's a very beautiful.
Yeah, go and get it.
Oops, it just dropped on the floor. It's just a really intricate. It's quite an intricate medal, and detailed, and then on the other side, and it's really just quite dinky. Really, it's quite small, but it's really quite, for me, it's quite a precious medal, because just really what it signifies. But more importantly, it has the number of the it has a number on the top, 107. I don't know if that's the number of the years the league's been going for, and we won it by a record number of points and goals, which was quite unique, which was wonderful as well. And the amazing thing, I must say, this was funny, was we got promoted really early in the season, so we then went away to Spain for a week. Steve wanted to take the team away as a well done, and it was amazing. It was like a glorified stag week, and we just every night was a night out. And I even remember going for a coffee with Steve one morning, and we're walking down through Port Banús, and I was just looking down. There was this guy laying in the gutter, and I just elbowed. I said, "Steve, that's your centre half. That is." Just sitting there, sort of trying to get his head together, getting up. but it was a great time because we came back, and I think our first game was against, was it Derby, and we won 5 or something. It was just a crest of a wave we were on. It was amazing. But yeah, no, I think we were very lucky to go, I say, 2 Champions Leagues. One 2012 was on field, and it was such a great game, a game that we were written off to win, really, against Bayern Munich in their own stand, in their own stadium, and to win with, you know, the penalties, Didier's header. And I think a colleague, Mike Davison, was talking to me, said he always makes me laugh when he sees the footage of that, because he said, you always said, oh, I'm not really into the games and not really that important, but you said you're the first one running on the pitch after he scores to celebrate with him. So that was a great experience, and it was a great experience again with Thomas when we beat Man City and in Porto to win it again, because it was nice seeing it from the other side. I was in the VIP lounge and seeing the other side of it. I thought, God, this is a nice way to watch a game, rather than freezing your bits off downstairs. And you always watch games differently as a physio covering a game. You're always watching what's happening before to see if there's some carnage left behind. Whereas to watch it from a different perspective was always good. And then the great thing I think with that was that going on to taking the team to the things that we hadn't achieved before, like the Super Cup and then the World Club Cup, which we'd struggled with before. And the first time we played the World Club Cup was in Japan, and we were playing, I think, Corinthians in the final. And it was one of those games where we'd been in Tokyo with Rafa was the manager, and we won the semi-final just about. We weren't really convincing, and we were playing the Brazilian team the next game, and we all felt that people don't take this seriously. Why is no one taking this seriously? And when we lost the game, all the South American players were distraught, completely crying, thinking, "Oh, this is horrendous." And you think they just look like they've just lost the Premier League title, whereas everybody else seemed a bit lackadaisy. And I don't think they realised the importance and the potential of being called world champions. So to achieve that a few years later was amazing. And as I said before, we were so lucky to be, and me being at a club that was so successful over the years, to, you know, League Cups and FA Cups. I think these were things that the players like JT were, you know, he may have a bit of bad press sometimes, but I've got nothing but high regard for players like JT and Frank, and Petter and Didier, the senior players at the club for many years, who really helped to support and acknowledge the staff that got the players to that level, and got together with some of these little mementos to allow you to really get something to keep and to look up to as a memory for what you've achieved. And then little things like we won the Europa League with Rafa. So it's funny how the little ups and downs of games allow you to achieve and to win some amazing games. And it was always very, very exciting. And sometimes I think you probably take it a little bit for granted at times, because it became such a regular thing. But then again, the regular thing of winning becomes a habit. I remember going to Stamford Bridge, where every game we were going, we just think, well, okay, another 3 points. But everybody was so confident that we were going to win. There was never any element of doubt. It was always that winning mentality was ingrained into everybody. Everybody had their routines, everybody had their systems, and it was an incredibly successful period. And it was great to be part of it. Really, really amazing.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And like from your perspective then, so you're heavily involved on the clinical side, but from a professional self-development perspective, are you into that, of like reading books or any things that you read?
Yeah, I think, again, being at a club like Chelsea, I think there's a little bit of a false noma as well, that because you're a club like Chelsea or Man United and City or Spurs, people always perceive that, oh, you must know everything. You know what there is to know everything, and you must be experts in your field. And I see a lot of people in clubs that aren't as high profile, that have amazing knowledge and are very well read. But when you're at those clubs, you usually do get asked. I've written probably 3 or 4 chapters for different books over the years. And I think I've only been asked not because I'm any good at writing chapters, because I was at Chelsea. It's as simple as that. And I think I was only asked to speak at certain conferences, not necessarily because I've got a lot to say that's of any interest. And if I stayed at Reading, probably wouldn't have got asked to half of the conferences. I think the world is fickle, it really is. But I think you only get asked because you're working for those environments and those clubs, which I think is something that could maybe change a little bit. But yeah, I always used to use the time for traveling, you know, up to probably when Conte was there. Conte, I injured my knee, I ruptured my patella tendon when Conte was manager after a few months and into his second season. And I couldn't do games. And I didn't really go back to games properly after that because the medical team had to change a bit to cover me not doing games. So my role changed to become a bit more rehab, more managerial, and that coordination role, which was great for me, really. I'd been doing games for a long time and got a little bit bored of it, really. And I didn't get as excited about games and that type of role as much as I used to. So it probably was a good thing that happened to me. But I always used the traveling to facilitate my learning. So on the way to games, whether we'd have 4 or 5 hours on a plane or on a coach or whatever, I'd always do something. I'd read some articles. I've been lecturer at a couple of universities, visiting lecturer at Birmingham and at Queen Mary's, and I've done some stuff with King's and UCL where I did my masters for many years. So I've always been associated with the universities. So I've always had a few lectures to keep on top of and to keep up to date over the years. And that always pushed me to keep that knowledge base up. And I think I'm quite reactive in my learning when it came to injuries, because obviously we had an instance a few years ago where we had 2 Achilles ruptures very close together. So and we'd had probably 1 or 2 Achilles ruptured over the years, but nothing as dramatic in as such high profile players. So then I just sort of, my whole world became Achilles ruptures, and my learning became more reactive. And I think in football sometimes you get some injuries that you don't see as much, and your learning has to be incredibly reactive to learn as much as you possibly can, to take you to the level that the players and everybody expects you to know. So that in itself molds your learning, I think, a lot of the time. And so, you know, the big thing at the moment, as I said before, is probably hamstrings. Everybody's into 3C and 4C and looking at the evidence pro and con. And I think we're going down a line of sometimes overthinking, and we're definitely going down a line of overlooking at MRI scans and using MRI scans to guide us about our care, which I think is a very dangerous tool, because I think that interpretation isn't very clear, and the evidence isn't really very accurate on using that as a reliable tool to return to play and rehab processes. But it's something that I think, if you've got it in your blood to learn and to develop and to not sit in your laurels, it's a very healthy process, and it's something that I think, as physios particularly, it's something that seems to be in our blood. I think we're very unlike many other health professions, just as many other professions in the world, where we never really want to sit still. We always want to learn. And I look at the amount of podcasts and things that go out there, and there's so much to learn. And even in the sort of allied things, like I'm a member of Leaders Performance, and even in that world of knowledge and exchanging information can be, it's where you go, there's so much information. And you think of what this thing can do to us now in terms of knowledge. I remember when I first went to West Ham, I had a bleeper. That was my method of communication, was a little tiny bleeper by BT, and then we never had phones, so it shows you how old I am. But yeah, and I think that knowledge base then has to become very bespoke. I think you've got to have your philosophy, your knowledge base is based on you and what you're excited in and what you're interested in, which I think is really important, because then if you're excited and interested in it yourself, you're going to be very passionate about it. If you're very passionate about it, the chances are you're going to be pretty good at it. One will lead on to another.
What's the Leaders thing you mentioned?
Leaders is the Performance Institute. It's a conference that's happened a few times. We had a couple of times at Stamford Bridge. The last few has been at Twickenham, and it's Leaders is a company that runs courses. They have a lot of online seminars and webinars where they get people from lots of different areas of sports performance, but even high profile businesses. And I suppose the commonality of it is that it's discussing performance in its entirety in different ways of analysing what performance is, how it can be improved in all the different factors, from coaching to sports science to medicine to mental health, to strategy, club strategy, facilities, all these different aspects that make up an organisation. And whether it be business is wanting to learn so much from sport, just as much as sport is now starting to learn more from business, and that crossover, especially now with data being such a big thing. I think football and sport is learning from how data has been utilised by the Microsofts of the world for many, many years, and YouTube and WhatsApp, all the big computer companies, and how they deal with data. I think the problem is trying to decipher what's important data and what isn't important data. That's the challenge I think we have going forward. But it's really a forum to look at all those different areas of performance, but also getting people together from different networks. And I've bumped into people from professional cycling, professional cricket, professional rugby, just as much as people from different companies, like the Zone 7s and other areas of performance measurements and metrics that have a common platform, and it's a nice area to discuss stuff with. So
it sounds great.
It's an interesting concept, and I think you can look up online.
Yeah, I think I might have actually seen some of the conferences knocking around. Now you've explained it, I think I've seen some of those. But look, John, I really appreciate your time on this. I find it really fascinating, and I appreciate you being so candid on a lot of subjects that are still present with you and things. So it's great to see your knowledge, and I'm sure that will be massively in demand.
Hope so. Hope so. Yeah, I think it's just a case of looking at what opportunities come around and getting excited by them and taking them forward, really. But I feel like I'm getting a nice, really juicy project, a nice, exciting thing. I'd like to stay in football. I think it's not what I know and what I love, and I hope that my skills can be utilised somewhere down the line, and look at it positively. It would be exciting, hopefully. And just like, it's probably a real cliche where I look back on either my career or other people's careers where things happen to you and things knock you back. But I heard it this morning on the radio. What doesn't break you makes you stronger, and I think it's a case of moving forward. And no job lasts forever. No job lasts forever. I was there 13 years, and maybe it's probably time to do something different anyway, and it's probably forced my hand. So it's now looking forward to do something exciting. So
great. No, sounds good. But I really appreciate your time, and I will look forward to catching up with you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, John. Thank you.